Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes Money and Politics reporter, Kyle Mullins. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me.
Always great to be here, Brittany.
The Forbes Billionaires list recently came out. A lot of familiar faces, one of them being someone you and I chat about pretty frequently, and that is former President Donald Trump. And his finances have been a topic of conversation for a while now, but especially in the recent months as he finds himself owing millions of dollars in legal penalties. So before we get into his fortune, can you remind us how he got into this position?
Sure. Seems like we talk about this every time, and that's because his legal woes just keep continuing on. Donald Trump is his legal liabilities are stemming from two legal battles, both in the state of New York. The first one comes from a suit brought by writer E. Jean Carroll. She sued him for defamation and sexual abuse, and she won two verdicts against him, totaling about $88 million there. The second legal battle that he's facing is much larger. The Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, sued Trump and his businesses and some of his family members for alleged widespread fraud over the course of years and years of his business operating in the state of New York. She won a judgment against him for about over something nearing $460 million, and that is including a large amount of interest on his allegedly ill-gotten gains. He is appealing both cases. He's also posted bond in both cases now. And so this is really going to be up to the appeals courts to see what happens next.
A lot of legal liabilities, as you said, in the neighborhood of hundreds of millions of dollars. But as we said at the top, he is a billionaire. So how are his legal challenges impacting his net worth?
So we're estimating his total legal liabilities are lowering his net worth by over $500 million, about $540 million, and counting every day. Well, actually, he has posted bond now, so his interest is no longer, as far as I know, growing every single day. So that's really the big thing that's weighing him down.
That's weighing him down, but total, give us that number, lay out his finances for us. How much is former President Donald Trump worth, according to Forbes?
So according to Forbes' most recent Billionaires list, which came out yesterday, he's only worth $2.3 billion on that list. But that's because we locked in those values just before his Truth Social company, Trump Media and Technology Group, went public. And so just days after we locked in those values, his net worth almost tripled. And I think it was as high as $6.4 billion at one point. It's now down to about 5.8 as that stock moves around. So for folks, if you want to follow where he's at any given moment, you can go to Forbes' live Billionaires list, which is separate from our annual Billionaires list update. And you can you can see where he is at any given point there. That actually will track live the movements of that stock.
I talked to one of our colleagues, Chase Peterson-Withorn, last week when his net worth, and by his, I mean Donald Trump's net worth, not Chase's, more than doubled in the span of a day, as you said, because of Truth going public. But how has his net worth changed year over year? It seems like it's a bit of a roller coaster.
It has absolutely been a bit of a roller coaster. So, on the one hand, you have this massive legal liability, this $540 million that we're deducting from his net worth. This is the first valuation that we've done at Forbes that is actually deducting those legal liabilities. So that brings him down quite a bit from the last time we valued him in September. At the same time, we have this massive new asset that he has, Truth Social, which has exploded in value. And is now, a super majority of his net worth. Over 60% of his net worth is now represented by his holdings in DJT, his initials, which are the ticker symbol for this company. So it really has been a bit of a roller coaster. And I expect that we're going to see his net worth continue to swing around with the stock price of DJT going forward. Now so much of his net worth is tied to that publicly traded stock. But I'll also say, and this is I think what we're going to get into a little bit, under the hood, he still has about $2 billion in real estate and a bunch of other assets. And so we're talking about, and those things have changed as well. So I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but those things are also moving and changing his fortune, on the order of, in the hundreds of millions of dollars in one direction or the other. It's important to look at that stuff too, as well as the publicly traded stock.
As we all know, he became a household name really because of real estate, but Truth Social made his net worth more than double last week, in the neighborhood of $5 billion, as you said. But I want to read you something that Forbes reported last week. Truth Social brought in $4.6 million in revenue over the past 4 quarters, less than half that of an average Cheesecake Factory restaurant. So is Truth Social a good business?
Well, far be it from me to go after the Cheesecake Factory, first of all. I mean, I'm a fan. My fiance and I, we go there for date night. It's a good time. But with that said, I would not want to be running a Cheesecake Factory that was losing tens of millions of dollars on that revenue. And Truth Social, which is a tech startup, and as we know, tech startups do tend to lose money for the first years of their existence. Some companies like Reddit still aren't profitable today. They're still losing money. But Truth Social is losing tens of millions of dollars. It's got single-digit millions in revenues. I wouldn't call this the strongest of businesses. And the investor consensus seems to be right now that a lot of the value of this stock is being propped up by a combination of, fervor from his supporters and sort of a meme stock energy. We saw this with GameStop. We saw this with AMC. Some of the valuations seem a little sky high right now.
So as you said earlier, his net worth is over $5 billion. Let's talk about those assets that are helping increase his fortune a bit. What are they?
So putting aside Truth Social for a moment, which is by far the biggest jump that we've considered over the past year, he's got a couple of things that are still boosting his fortune under the hood, those more classic traditional assets that Forbes has been valuing for decades. We've got his golf courses. He got 13 courses across the United States and in Scotland and Ireland, and those courses are doing quite well. The golf market is really hot right now. Post-pandemic, there's been a boom in millennials going out to golf. His clubs were already kind of at the high end of the market, and that's boosting those values even higher. And then the second thing I should note is his resorts are also doing fairly well. Doral, in particular, his Doral resort in Miami, has really seen a major increase in its valuation by Forbes. The reason why is we got some new revenue figures for it that came out in combination of his financial disclosures and in that fraud trial. And it's making a lot more money than it used to. Doral is making almost double what it was making in 2019, which is the last year pre-pandemic that we had numbers for it. So I think those things are really the things that are driving his fortune up quite considerably, and that's about $170 million right there between those golf courses and Doral.
Now let's talk about the flip side a bit. What are some of those assets driving his wealth down?
So the story there is really about his office properties. He has 2 minority partnerships in 2 office buildings in New York and in San Francisco. And both of those downtowns still really haven't fully recovered from the pandemic. They haven't rebounded that like a lot of folks had hoped. And so, people are still working from home. And so the office market is really just the weakest it's been in a long time. It's not a good time to sell those properties. So that continues to sort of drive the valuations of those properties down. I should also note 40 Wall Street, which is another office building that Trump owns and operates in Manhattan. In addition to suffering from the overall office market not being very strong, 40 Wall Street's also suffering because it has a ground lease that is set to explode in cost for Trump in the early 2030s. My colleague Zach Everson covered this, I think, last week or maybe the week before. It's all blurring together at this point. But all of those office properties together are really dragging his net worth down in that direction.
As we know, since 2015, when he announced he was running for president, Trump has been somewhat of a polarizing figure. Most people have strong opinions about him either way. Also, if you walk down the street, see a lot of his properties, the name Trump is splashed on the side in front of the building. Have his assets been impacted by the nature of his polarization because he is a political figure? Has that impacted them at all?
So I think a lot of the attention on this question has focused on sort of the drawbacks for Trump. Are liberals and Democrats not going to his properties? They're not buying his condos. They don't want to go to his resorts or something. And we do see some of that. For example, his Doral resort, which we were talking about before, really suffered when he was president. Folks didn't want to go there. But with that said, it's recovered. We've seen a lot of that kind of effect drop away as his presidency has kind of faded. It was a couple of years ago now, and so that effect has kind of disappeared. And I would say that I think it would be hard to see him creating a social media company that has such explosive value and growth right now if it were not for his presidency and his politics. And so one could make the argument that he has benefited immensely. He's even made billions off of politics, just from Truth Social alone. I think if we're counting that. Now, again, that said, Truth Social's valuation is kind of highly debatable. Again, investor consensus is that there's a lot of meme stock mania behind that. So we'll see whether that value actually continues to stay up or not. It has fallen quite a bit even since it went public. So that's kind of open to interpretation.
Kyle, as we know, there was good news for the former president this week in the New York case. He was able to post his $175 million bond in that civil fraud case against him and his company for now. So does $175 million still hurt him, considering his net worth is over $5 billion?
So yes and no. Strictly speaking, in Forbes' estimates, we're not deducting the bond amounts from his net worth right now. We're instead just deducting the full legal liability that he has. So we're deducting that full $540 million of legal liabilities between those two cases. With that said, we're also saying he still has, estimates about $400 million in cash right now. That's a pretty big cash pile, but a majority of it is now essentially collateral for these two bonds, between the $175 million bond that he got in his fraud case and about a $90 million bond that he got in the E. Carroll case. So between those two, that's sucking up most of his liquid assets. It could potentially weigh on his ability to run his business effectively if he wants to pay off more debts or if he needs a big cash infusion into one of his companies. He won't be able to access that cash quite as easily because it's locked up as collateral for these bonds.
Kyle, Trump's finances have made you very busy because, as we all know, your beat is money in politics. So when it comes to the former president's finances, what are you looking out for next? What's on your radar?
I really think there's three questions about his finances over the coming weeks, months, years even. The first one is, where does the value of Truth Social go? That is, like I said, a super majority of his net worth right now. And if the value continues to decline like it has since the IPO a week or two ago, we're going to see his net worth decline as well. If, on the other hand, it stays high, for whatever reason, it's propped up by institutional investors or by sort of the meme stock potential for it, he could cash out. And that could be, in 6 months, once the lockup provisions expire, he could cash out and potentially get his money into a more liquid form. The second question I have is whether appeals courts are going to give him any sort of reprieve for these legal liabilities. He's got, $540 million plus in legal liabilities. But if he wins any of these cases on appeal, which he very well could do, I don't know how these judges are going to rule. If that happens, then those liabilities will go away. That will boost his net worth. And we did see the appeals court in New York grant him a bond that is significantly lower than the overall judgment against him in the fraud case. That could indicate that maybe they're sympathetic to some of the arguments that the Trump team is making. We don't know. It's hard to say. We'll probably find out in the fall, I think, in that fraud case. And then the third question I have is, these two cases are not the only legal problems that he's having. I'm wondering about his legal expenses, how he's actually paying his lawyers. So far, he's been able to do so using donor money, but he's going to be running a presidential campaign. He is running a presidential campaign right now, and that's going to be competing for funds with his lawyers. And so if he's facing 4 different criminal cases in 4 different jurisdictions, that's New York, Florida, DC, and Georgia. He's going to be fighting all of those cases over the course of this year. He's going to be paying out millions of dollars in legal bills. At some point that might start to take a bite out of his cash pile as well.
Well, Kyle, there are a lot of good questions you just had, and I'm sure as those answers shake out, you'll come back on and you will break it down for us. Kyle Mullins, thank you again for joining me.
Always great to be here, Brittany.